Hi guys, this is Erica from Gokce Capital.
Now before I begin, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications. I once had an owner reach out to me who was interested in selling their vacant land in New York, and when I looked at it, it was completely covered in wetlands. The owner had paid over $50,000 for this parcel of land, and when I mentioned the wetlands, they knew nothing about them. Now unfortunately, we had to pass on this property as wetlands can pose a number of issues when you go to build on a property. Sadly, this wasn't the only circumstance like this that I've run across. So I thought I'd put together a video to give you some of the top things you should know about wetlands and how to find them on a property to ensure that you are not caught off guard when you purchase a property that you would like to build on. But first, let me just cover quickly what a wetland is. Now, according to the EPA, wetlands are areas where water covers the soil or is present either at or near the surface of the soil all year or for varying periods of time. This is a bit of a mouthful, but basically what it's saying is, as the name would suggest, wetlands are areas that are wet either all year round or for significant periods of time throughout the year. And they are characterized by water-loving vegetation, as well as hydric soils. Having said all this, the water may not necessarily be visible at first glance, which is why pointer number 1 is to have a property surveyed for wetlands prior to purchasing it. No matter where you are purchasing, you want to, at the very least, take a look at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's wetlands mapper to see whether there are any federally designated wetlands on the land. You may be surprised, even in arid climates like the deserts of Nevada and New Mexico, you can occasionally find a small wetland that appears at certain times of year and is usually formed at the basin of drainage pathways where water runs after a storm. And this is what the wetlands mapper looks like. You can find a location using an address or GPS coordinates. Just put the longitude first. And when you pull up the location, you will see all wetlands as a layer in either blue or green. Blue usually indicates a water body like a stream or a lake, whereas green indicates the actual wetland. However, the wetlands mapper is not foolproof. For example, we were once looking at a property in New York that did not show any wetlands on it, but there was a wetland in the nearby vicinity. However, when I spoke to the state regulatory body, they informed me that the neighboring property owner had recently tried to develop their property and so had had a delineation done, which found wetlands both on that property and the one I was looking at. So this is why, if your property is in an area with nearby wetlands, it's a good idea to hire a wetlands professional to delineate any potential wetlands before you purchase. And this is the only way to definitively know whether wetlands are present on the property and what the boundaries of those wetlands are. Certain states or counties may offer such delineation services at no cost, although depending on their workload, you may have to wait for a month or so before they can get the delineation done. Number 2, you need a permit to alter wetlands. So you may be wondering at this point, why do we care about wetlands in the first place? Well, if there's a federally designated wetlands on your property, you will need a permit to undertake almost any kind of activity on the property, aside from simply using it for recreational purposes. Under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers administers the permitting process. And the reason why wetlands are heavily regulated is because when wetlands are filled, it can often create flooding issues for neighboring properties and regions. In addition, wetlands are often vital in ensuring clean water. Thus, they are considered a vital public resource, and this is why a permit is required to alter, diminish, dredge, or otherwise damage any federally designated wetlands. And it is not necessarily easy to get a permit, although if you are only looking to build a single-family home, and this project will impact 1/2 acre or less of non-tidal wetlands, there is a streamlined permitting process. Otherwise, you will need to get an individual permit. Now, such a permit is not guaranteed, but in order to get it, you will almost certainly need to show that you are mitigating or minimizing any impacts to the wetlands. So if you find federal wetlands on your property and you want to build, you have 3 potential options. The first is to avoid the wetlands altogether. So this involves creating your project without disturbing any wetlands on the property. This is the ideal scenario, and if you do this, you may be able to avoid the need for a permit altogether. Alternatively, you can try to minimize the impact, which essentially just means you impact the smallest portion of the wetland possible. You will need a permit for the project if you do this, but if you are successful at dramatically minimizing your impact, you may be able to circumvent some of the slower processes involved in getting an individual permit. And finally, if there is no way to avoid damages to an existing wetland, you can mitigate this damage by enhancing or restoring wetlands elsewhere. In fact, this will often be required in order to obtain your Section 404 permit. Number 4, you may also need a permit when building near a wetland. And this is because construction, even if it is not directly on top of an existing federal wetlands, can still impact those wetlands by disturbing soils and altering water flow pathways. So even if there are no wetlands on your property, if there are wetlands nearby, you may need a permit. And number 5, the maintenance of any building located on an existing wetland can be extensive. So even if you're successful in getting a permit and constructing your building, you may have ongoing problems. This is because when wetlands are filled, the water that makes them wet has to go somewhere, and that somewhere could very well be your building. And for this reason, it's usually best to avoid building on wetlands altogether. So those are the top 5 things you should know about building on a wetland. But I'll leave you with one last bonus item, and that is to keep in mind that there are also state-regulated wetlands. This video primarily discussed federal wetlands, but many states have designated additional regions as state-designated wetlands, and these wetlands may not show up on the federal wetlands mapper, but could have very similar restrictions imposed at the state level. So this is another reason why it is always a good idea to have a delineation done by a local wetlands professional, because they should also be able to catch any state-regulated wetlands as well. Now, do you have any stories about buying property with wetlands on it? Let us know in the comments. And if you like this video, you're going to love our Gokce Land Due Diligence program. We'll make you a land due diligence expert in 7 days. Check it out at gokcecapital.com/glad. And while you're at our website, don't forget to explore our $1 down properties at gokcecapital.com/listings. Finally, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email, call, or text, and we will respond as soon as possible. So thank you for listening, and more to come.